So, when you think on how long a war will span, you usually think a few months to a few years, which is pretty typical. The longest war in history, the Iberian Religious War, lasted 781 years, and then the shortest war in history, the Anglo-Zanzibar War, lasted a whopping 34 minutes. So you could take a nap, wake up, and be classified as a war veteran. Nice. Zanzibar is located in Africa and is on an island on the Indian Ocean. It has been under the control of the Sultans of Oman since 1698, after they kicked out the Portuguese, who claimed it since 1499. Sultan Majid Bissed declared that the island was independent from that of Oman in 1858, which the UK recognized it as a country, and also split the Sultan from that of Oman. Barkash bin Said, the second Sultan from Khalid's father, been forced by a British ultimatum to abolish the slave trade in June 1873, but was later discovered that they could have just rejected it without aggression from Britain. The Sultans moved the capital and the seat of government to a complex building on the seafront. By 1896, this consisted of the palace itself, the Belt el Kahum, an attached harem, and Belt el Hajehebe, or House of Wonders, a ceremonial palace which is said to be the first building in East Africa to have electricity. The building was built with the local timber and was not designed for defense or warfare, because in the late 19th century, armies were developing in technology, arms, and equipment. Also, the British and the Sultan had been having good relations. The German Empire was looking to make a colonial empire themselves and was interested in East Africa. So the Germans and the British viewed for control, rights, and territories in the late 19th century. Sultan Khalid gave the Germans Tanganyika and gave the British Kenya, which resulted in the prohibition of the slave trade in those lands. And Tanganyika, the Germans refused to fly the flag of Zanzibar Sultan, which led to clashes with the Germans and the local population. One led to 20 Arabs killed. Sultan Khalid sent Zanzibari troops with Brigadier General Lloyd Matthew, a former Royal Navy general, to restore order in Tanganyika. It was successful, but the people still had an anti-German sentiment. The conflict started at Deja-Moyo, where 150 natives were killed by German troops, and then at Kayatwa, German officials and their servants were murdered. The Imperial British East Africa Company and the Germans naval blockaded Zanzibar to halt the doministic slave trade. Caliphate died in 1890, and Ali bin Said ascended to Sultan, banned on the doministic slave trade, and declared Zanzibar a British protectorate. Ali appointed Lloyd Matthews as his first minister to lead his cabinet. The same year, Ali signed the Heligoland-Zanzibar Treaty between Great Britain and the German Empire. This treaty basically ceased German rights in Zanzibar to the British. Ali's successor was Hamid bin Kawini, who became Sultan in 1893. Hamid did what Ali did and maintained close relations with Great Britain. The British increased their power in Zanzibar and officially abolished the slave trade, which was valuable to Zanzibar. British authorities authorized the Sultan to raise the Sultan bodyguard to 1,000, but soon these troops would get into clashes with the British-led police. Also, complaints from the European residents of the bodyguard's activities. Hamid died suddenly at his palace on August 25th, 1896. No one knows the cause of his death, but some say that he was poisoned by his cousin or nephew. I don't know because I have two different sources open, and one says his nephew, while Wikipedia says it's his cousin. Or actually, sorry, it's the opposite. I'm not sure. A few hours after Hamid's death, his cousin Khalid bin Barkash moved up to the new sultan. The British didn't want Khalid to be sultan, but they wanted Hamoud bin Hamid, who was more towards the British than Khalid. Chief diplomat Fasil Cave and General Matthews to stand down from his position. He ignored and started to gather his troops around the palace. By the end of the day, Khalid mustered 2,800 men, armed with rifles and muskets. The majority were civilians, but were force included 700 Zanzibari Askari soldiers who had sided with Khalid. The Sultan's artillery consisted of several Maxim machine guns, Gatling gun, and a 17th century bronze cannon, and two 12-pounder guns, and a British yacht fitted with Zanzibari to be a warship. Fun fact, the 12-pounder field gun was presented by Kaiser Wilhelm II, and all were aimed at the British ships in the harbor. At the same time, the British had two warships in the harbor, the HMS Palomial, and the HMS Rush, and troops were sent ashore to protect the British consulates and keep the population from rioting. Haig requested backup from another British ship, the HMS Sparrow, which arrived at the harbor at evening on August 25, 1896. Also, some pro-British Zanzibaris, 900 Zanzibar Askarias, were under Lieutenant Arthur Edward Harrison Rex, and 150 sailors and marines. Rawson sent an ultimatum requesting Khalid to take down his flag and leave the palace at 9 o'clock, the 27th of August, or he will open fire. Here's what a telegram said from Cave and Rawson to Khalid, saying, "You are authorized to adopt whatever measures you may consider necessary, and will be supported in your action by Her Majesty's government. Do not, however, intend to make any action which you are not certain of being able to accomplish successfully." All merchant vessels were cleared and women and children were relocated to St. George. That night, Consul Mahoon noted that the silence which hung over the Zanzibar was unappealing. Usually Jones were beaten and babies were crying at that night. There were absolutely not a sound. On August 27, 1896, at 8 a.m., after a messenger from Khalid had a message from Cave, he wanted to have a parley with him, and he said that he would bring salvation if he agreed to the terms of the ultimatum. At 8:30 a.m., a message from Khalid saying, "We have no intentions of hauling down our flag, and we have to not believe you would open fire on us." Cave responded with, "No, we do not want to open fire on you, but unless you do as you are told, we shall certainly do so." At 8:55 a.m., and having no further letters from the palace, Rawson, who was in the St. George, hoisted the signal "Prepare for action." At 9 a.m., Matthews ordered a bombardment of the palace. Then at 9:02 a.m., the bombardment began. Thrush and Sparrow fired at the palace, simulating, and Rush first shot and immediately dismounted an Arab 12-pounder cannon. The palace was collapsing with 3,000 defenders inside, and there were barricades of crates with valves and rubber. High explosive shells were costing the Zanzibaris many casualties. At 9:05, the Sultan's yacht had been turned into a warship, attacked St. George, which had 7-pounder gun and a Gatling gun, which was quickly sunk, and the Zanzibaris hoisted a British flag and surrendered. 2 minutes after the bombardment started, it is thought that Khalid fled out of the palace, but the British got intel that Khalid was captured and was exiled to India. But that was not true, because he escaped to German East Africa. At 9:40 a.m., the bombardment stopped, and the palace and attached harem caught fire. Some land fighting occurred, but ended when the bombardment stopped. The British controlled the town, and Hamid bin Hamid was made sultan, but a lot of power was reduced. The war cost the lives of 500 Zanzibaris, and for the British, they had 1 sailor injured.